and say that. So I'll say it again that that's good to be back in class and engaging in text. And so I know that we left off in Judges chapter 11, verse 29. So what I want to do after I say the blessing is to remind us what the first 28 verses said in chapter 11, just to read the English, and then pick up in verse 29 because we're almost at the end of that chapter. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I actually want to read Robert Alter's translation because it's just easier for me to read regular English as opposed to old-fashioned English. So if we turn to 165 in the Alter book, right, ancient Israel, and Yiftach the Gileadite was a valiant warrior, and he was the son of a whorewoman, and Gilad had begotten Yiftach. And Gilad's wife bore him sons, and the wife's sons grew up, and they drove Yiftach out and said to him, "You shall not inherit in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." And Yiftach fled from his brothers and dwelled in a land of Tov, and no account men drew round Yiftach and sallied forth with him. And it happened after a time that the Ammonites did battle with Israel. And it happened when the Ammonites did battle with Israel that the elders of Gilead went to take Yiftach from the land of Tov. And they said to Yiftach, "Come, be our captain, that we may do battle with the Ammonites." And Yiftach said to the elders of Gilead, Did you not hate me and drive me out from my father's house? And why do you come to me now when you're in distress? And the elders of Gilead said to Yiftach, "Therefore now we have come back to you, and you shall go with us and do battle with the Ammonites, and you shall become chief for us for all the inhabitants of Gilead." So that's a way of saying we're sorry without saying we're sorry, or acknowledging what Yiftach said. Yeah, you're right, but therefore now we have come back to you. So in other words, therefore what? You usually say therefore after saying something before that. So whatever they said before it is missing, but it's assumed that they apologized or recognized that Yiftach was right. And Yiftach, so verse 9, and Yiftach said to the elders of Gilead, "If you bring me back to do battle with the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me, it is I who will be your chief." So in other words, make me your appoint me to do battle. If we win, then I'll be your chief. And the elders of Gilead said to Yiftach, "May the Lord be witness between us that we will surely do according to your word." And Yiftach went with the elders of Gilead, and the people set him over them as chief and captain. And Yiftach spoke all his words before the Lord at Mitzpah. And Yiftach sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, saying, "What is between you and me that you have come to do battle in my land?" And the king of the Ammonites said to Yiftach's messengers, "For Israel took my land when it came up from Egypt, from the Arnon to the Yabbok and to the Jordan, and now give them back in peace." So that is the tribe of Gad, the tribe of Reuben, half the tribe of Manasseh, after they defeated the Ammonites in battle in the book of Numbers. Those 2.5 tribes took possession of that Ammonite territory on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Okay, so picture in your mind's eye the Dead Sea north, but on the right-hand side of the Dead Sea, the eastern side, that's where those 2.5 tribes settled. So the claim now, the Ammonites, is we want it back. And now give them back in peace. So we don't want to do war. Just give them back, and then no reason to do war, to go to war. And Yiftach sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, and he said to him, "Thus says Yiftach, Israel did not take the land of Moab and the land of the Ammonites, but when it came up from Egypt, Israel went in the wilderness as far as the Sea of Reeds and came to Kadesh. And Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, 'Let me pass, pray, through your land.' And the king of Edom did not listen. And to the king of Moab too they sent, and he would not agree. And Israel stayed in Kadesh. And they went through the wilderness and swung around the land of Edom and the land of Moab, and came from the east of the land of Moab and camped across the Arnon, and did not come into the territory of Moab, because the Arnon is the border with Moab. And Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon, and said to him, "Let us pass, pray, through your land to our place." And Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. And Sihon gathered all his troops, and they camped at Yahaz, and did battle with Israel. And the Lord God of Israel gave Sihon and all his troops into the hand of Israel, and they struck them down, and Israel took hold of all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that land. And they took hold of all the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon to the Yabok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. And so the Lord God of Israel dispossessed the Amorites before his people Israel. And would you possess it? Do you not take possession of what Chemosh your God gives you to possess? In other words, you have your God and your land. What do you need more land for? And all that the Lord our God has given us to possess, of that we shall take possession. And now, are you really better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he strive with Israel? Did he do battle with them? When Israel dwelled in Heshbon, and in its hamlets, and in Arar, and in its hamlets, and in all the towns that are along the Arnon 300 years, why did you not recover them in all that time? I, on my part, have committed no offense against you, yet you are doing evil to battle with me. Let the Lord, who is judge today between the Israelites and the Moabites. But the king of the Ammonites did not listen to Yiftach's words that he had sent him. Okay, so that's where we had left off. So Yiftach makes a good point and reiterates for us what was in the Torah, just reminds us. So raises the question, which we don't know the answer to, when was the book of Judges written in relationship to the book of Numbers, which describes the very events that Yiftach is talking about, and which came first? Did the book of Judges come first? Did the book of Numbers come first? And biblical scholars still debate that point to this day. So in other words, like the Torah could have been written after the book of Judges or at the time of the book of Judges. It's unclear, but this story serves as the Haftorah for the portion Chukat, which contain the events that are mentioned here in the Torah, in this book of Judges. So, yeah, go ahead.
Is this proof text that Israel is a colonist, a colonial?
Are we colonialists? No, because the Torah says that Abraham and Sarah went there first, right?
Right.
And they did not do battle with the indigenous Canaanites. That God said, you'll be parents of a great nation. Well, you'll be a father of a great nation, but I'll make it egalitarian. You'll be parents of a great nation, without talking about war. So if you believe the Torah's narrative, actually I'm going to be talking about this a little bit over the high holidays. If you believe the Torah narrative, then we were there, and we came, and we just grew more numerous than the indigenous population. But if you don't believe the Torah, because it's Torah, it's not proven fact, we can still prove our existence in the land of Israel, right? In other words, we did not dispossess entirely. We didn't kick out all of the indigenous population. The Torah commanded us to do so, but we never did it. Right? And that's what the book of Joshua and the book of Judges and Samuel and Kings talks about, that's our spiritual downfall, is that we kept the Canaanites there and were influenced negatively by their culture and by their religion. So we did not dispossess the land and force out the inhabitants. We were there. It's unclear for how long, but it's clear that we've been in the land of Israel for 3,000 years. It's also clear that the Canaanites are no longer there. And that even though we were kicked out by the Romans, we still have claim to that land as our land. And that doesn't make us colonizers when we come back to live in it. So people can tell that story all they want, that we're white European colonizers, but that narrative is there to disparage us Jews, to disparage Zionism, and to disparage the state of Israel, to say that we, the state of Israel, and Zionists, have no right to their immoral, unethical stance, which is blatantly false. So go ahead, Barry.
Well, you're presenting the biblical view, but there's also
There's a historical view too, which I'm saying that
well,
you don't need the Bible.
The historical view also theorizes in part that the Israelites grew out of the Canaanite nation and separated themselves, which makes them even more indigenous.
Okay.
I mean, if you buy that, that theory of archaeology.
Well, whatever theory is behind it, we know that there are Hebrew words from the Torah that were found in the excavation of the dirt from the time of the Temple Mount that prove that there's some Israelite culture in the land of Israel 3,000 years ago. It was proven with carbon dating that Hebrew and those verses from the Torah, which are the priestly blessing, are 3,000 years old. So however we got there is theory, but with the fact that we are there is fact. So, yeah.
And of course, migrations of people have happened throughout millennium in every continent, everywhere. I mean,
migrations of people, but okay.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a difference
England,
though between migration.
England.
Yep, there's a difference between migration and colonizing. Okay, right. It's clear that America was founded by colonizers, right? So white Europeans didn't exist on the continent, on the American continent, before the 1540s or 1580s, whenever Roanoke happened, right? Or St. Augustine, or Spanish colonizers in St. Augustine in the 1500s. So before that, there were no white people in America. And the fact that then British, French, and Spanish and Dutch colonizers came to America and set up colonies, and then our founding fathers created the United States of America, that clearly we are a colonizing people that intentionally kept out the Native Americans from that process. Okay, so to compare what Zionism and the establishment of the State of Israel to that process of America is patently false and meant to discredit the Zionist story and the entity that is the State of Israel. Okay, so there's a reason why people who are anti-Zionists and who claim that it's just a white European colonizing story, they have a motive behind that in order to say that we, as Jews and the State of Israel, have no right to exist. Okay, so it is it is anti-Semitic. And so, and then to also buy into a Palestinian narrative that is very different, to say the least, from a Jewish narrative about the claims to the land of Israel, and to buy into and to claim that Palestinians have the sole right to the land from this river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is just a whole other boggling of the mind and scratching of the head as to why the Palestinian story is the one that's accepted by the Western world and the United Nations, and not the Israeli story. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But look, my High Holiday sermons, which I've written 3 already, and I know what I'm writing in the 4th, are all about response to, how we've, what I've felt over this past year since October 7th. And it's just, nothing else has been on my mind other than October 7th and its consequences as for the state of Israel, for the Jewish people, for the American Jewish community. And so, if people are looking on a High Holidays for some generic talk about spiritual uplifting, then maybe go to Barry's service in his backyard. But maybe there'll be a sermon there too, and it's going to be something about October 7th. So yeah, you can't avoid it. It can't be avoided, and there'll be different perspectives, I'm sure, in synagogues throughout this country and around the world. But it is what it is, and yeah. Anyway, okay.
Jonah, can I just say one thing on that
Go
to
ahead,
tack
Marlene.
on?
Yeah.
No, just that, with all the history and 3,000 years ago, but a lot of times I just look at it, Israel's position from, and you mentioned the United Nations. So if you go to 1947
Right.
with the Balfour Declaration, so regardless, you couldn't just forget everything before that. And,
Right. Okay.
someone said, okay, this is what it is, even if, people don't like it. So there was some, legitimate,
Yes, so
giving up the land.
yes, other people do claim, in light of the Holocaust, there should be a place where Jews can live safely. But still, there's a part of that argument that says, why should the indigenous Arabs of the land of Israel suffer for the sake of Jews who had suffered, whose suffering is better to allow for self-determination? But I get that idea, but you see, obviously I buy into that idea, but I buy into that idea as secondary to the fact that we have a right, a 3,000-year-old right that can be proven by archaeology, if not a 4,000-year-old right, as we know from the stories of our people, to that land. And the fact that there are other people there, yes, there are other people there. And our story is all about how we have lived with those other people and have suffered by being influenced by those other people, according to the Bible, because we are influenced by their pagan ways, and we became pagan ourselves. But still, our story is a story of living with other people in the land. So that, for me, is the number one reason why we have a right to the land. And secondary to that is we have suffered and been persecuted and been murdered because we're Jewish, and we have a right to a place to live free. So that, yes, so the right to live in a place to be free, for me, is secondary to the fact that that is our land. Anyway, but I often speak to deaf ears,
Okay.
and
We all do.
yeah, so
You're preaching to the choir.
right, exactly.
Right.
But what I'm not to give it away, but to give it away, in one of my sermons said it's important for us to be reinforced in this story because of the constant bombardment of the other story every day in social media and in news media, all the time we are bombarded with this other narrative. So it's important to reiterate for ourselves what our narrative is and to feel confident in that narrative and to know that we have a right to that narrative and that it's true for us and it's we can be proud of it. So I think for me that's important. It's important to me to find strength in reiterating that story and then strength in numbers in community that come together on the high holidays. So, I decided the other day to step back from being the coordinator of the Only Interfaith group because when I had the meeting back in January, which was the last meeting of our group, and I found that talking about Israel really fell on deaf ears, and the immediate response was to talk about the Palestinian children who have been killed by the Israeli army. I found that I don't have a community of like-minded people. And it doesn't make sense for me to coordinate meetings for people that I have nothing to talk about with. So if somebody else wants to coordinate meetings, I'd be happy to attempt to attend. So I sent an email out to the group the other day, and I got 4 emails in response. Thanks, we understand where you're coming from. I said to the group, after October 7th, my mind has been focused on this and on our community and what we're going through, and I just don't have the mindset to continue to lead. And if somebody wants to, I'll be happy to meet with them privately and to give them the email list. So I only got 4 responses to say, we feel your pain and thank you for all you've done. But so that says a lot too. That nobody is interested in taking it over, and it's absolute quiet from the Muslims in the group. That says a lot. It says a lot too. Anyway,
Jonah,
yeah,
it's not just that there's this alternative narrative. It's just the way language is used. I mean, as a writer, I'm really attuned to how word choices affect. I mean, they discovered the 6 hostages were murdered, were shot,
yes,
and they just say, "Oh, they found
the
them
deaths,
dead."
right,
And
right. That's absolute.
I
But
read
that's
article after article,
yes,
and during the Trump years, everybody talked about where people get their news source from, and
right,
if you're going to get your news from the New York Times and the Washington Post and NPR, you're going to think one way, and if you're going to
yeah,
get it from Fox, you're going to think it another way.
right,
But boy, when it comes to Israel and what's happening
right.
there, it's just
But see,
unbelievable. I
Barry,
mean, I can't read or
the
hear
language is
anything.
purposeful. The language is purposeful because it's
Yes,
based on a narrative. The narrative is that Hamas fighters are freedom fighters, and they represent the Palestinian people, and they're fighting for the Palestinian right of self-determination. So it doesn't fit into the narrative that Hamas would do something wrong. And so, yeah, it's better to say that the hostages were found dead. And then in the article, it might say, because most people don't read that far into an article, right? In the article, it might say how they were found dead, like what were the circumstances of their death, but it doesn't say it in the headline. But
right.
It almost prompted me to end my subscription to the Washington Post. I've thought about it before. I never thought about it as much as that reporting about the hostages itself. I'm very, very tempted to do it, but there's another part of me that says it's important to see some source from the other side. But
Yes.
it's painful.
Right.
It's not
Right.
just the other side of a climate change argument, or the other side of how to help the poor and disadvantaged in American society. Do you want a Democratic vision of that or a Republican vision of that? Okay, so they're competing visions, and I buy into one, I don't buy into the other, but the other side doesn't pain me, right? This pains me to the other side because it comes from a place of hate and anti-Semitism. So, and that is just, or at least anti-Israel. But the line from anti-Israel to anti-Semitism is very thin, very thin. So,
And I think we can all count on one hand how many of our non-Jewish friends reached out after October 7th. I
right,
mean, we
right,
had
which
one
is
or
which is
two.
very sad, very, very sad indeed. And that, so that's my first day Rosh Hashanah sermon is abandonment. And how we deal with a sense of being abandoned. So,
Can I just say one thing, that word choice? It bothers me that Hamas militants are referred to as militants, not
right, not
terrorists.
terrorists, right. So
Right.
which is why I read the Wall Street Journal. That's why I read the Wall Street Journal.
Me
Okay,
too.
that's why I read Bret Stephens in the New York Times.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I read the people I like because they tell the truth as I see it. Okay, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Because in this time in which it's very painful to be Jewish and a lover of Israel, you need to be supported. And there's nothing wrong in my mind in reading the Wall Street Journal and the op-eds of those that I like in the New York Times, and to read the Times of Israel. In fact, I don't read Haaretz so much because they come from a very, very liberal perspective within Israeli society, which I don't really buy into. I also don't read the Jerusalem Post because that's too right-wing for me within Israeli society. I read the Times of Israel because it's a moderate approach and what I think is a fair approach to understanding what's going on in Israeli societies. But that's me, and everybody's entitled to what they read. It's just that I think that people just need to be careful about always questioning what the so-called truth is, and what the facts are that these news articles are writing about. So it's very, very complicated, and 4 sermons over the high holidays don't do the topic and what the deep emotional turmoil that we're going through. It doesn't do it all justice.
But what's indicative of how we all feel is that we came here for judges and we cannot.
Right.
This is so much of
Well,
our.
see, because what Judges is talking about, right, dispossessing the land of Israel is exactly what people are talking about today.
It's what we
Right.
read. We see it wherever we go in a
Right.
cereal
That's right. You can't
commercial.
help it. But this one is actually like right in our face, and it's right
Yeah.
there. Okay,
Yeah.
the other things that we're reading that we see that maybe, might not necessarily connect, but in our minds it connects. Yeah. No, it's very, very difficult. Yeah, I'm going to. So there's a family from the synagogue. Some of you, I think a lot of you know the Lorber family.
Right.
So anyway, they used to be members of the synagogue, and what's her name? Not
Marion.
Marion.
Marion. That's right. Matt.
Right.
I'm thinking, so they're divorced from Matt, but Marion's parents were also members of the synagogue, maybe even charter members. Anyway, so Marion has 2 sons, one of whom, Ben, is an author of a book, a co-author of a book about, from a progressive perspective on anti-Semitism and combating anti-Semitism. I didn't read the book. It's Standing in Solidarity, something like that. Just look for that, Ben Lorber. So he reached out to me last week, out of the blue. Hey, Rabbi, I don't know if you remember me, but I was mitzvah at Sharei Tefillah. These are my parents. These are my grandparents. Of course, I remember him. And he said he wrote this, co-authored this book, and he referred to Sharei Tefillah in it with the anti-Semitic graffiti back in the 80s. And he's giving a book talk at Busboys and Poets on Sunday in Tacoma Park on Sunday afternoon. And they wanted to know whether I'd be interested in attending. So I said, sure, I'll attend, especially because it's free. And why not?
And I'm Jewish.
Why not? But I'm a little bit leery of attending because I don't like to be in a confrontational situation. I really don't. I'm happy to stand up for myself, but I'm leery of doing it in a group setting because it never ends well. And standing up for yourself in a group like that, it's not safe, and you're never assured that the other side is actually going to listen to you with an open mind. So I'm leery about it because I'm going to have my dog tag necklace out and I'm going to have a kippah on. And in Tacoma Park, a hotbed of progressive, liberal people. And yes, Ben's book is about standing up against anti-Semitism, so that should be safe. But I'm just a little bit leery about that. So we'll see how it goes. It's 5 o'clock at Tacoma Park, so you can think about going if you wanted to go too. But,
Jonna,
yeah.
as a word of caution, my sister has lived in Tacoma Park for the past 40 years, and I know a lot of her friends, and it is quite a cauldron of ideas
Yes.
and different positions.
Yeah.
And be forewarned if you show up at an event there, especially a literary event,
Yeah.
you don't know what's going to come at you.
I know. Absolutely. I'm prepared to
Wow.
leave.
All right. Okay.
I hope I'll be there a little bit early. I hope to say hello to Ben so he knows that I'm there. But I plan to sit in the back and be very, very aware of what's being said and how it's being said. And the first moment of being uncomfortable, I plan to walk out, if not run away. So
Good decision.
It's a book about how liberals can support the Palestinian cause and can be concerned for them and their righteous demands for freedom, justice, and equality.
Yeah,
How
he
can we
he
stand
he had
aside?
a he had a pretty leftist view even 10 or 15 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, but isn't it also about anti-Semitism?
Well, I'm getting a radical guide to fighting, but is his co-author Shane Burley? He's not Jewish. I
Right.
presume. Okay, I'm just wondering how the two are discussing anti-Semitism.
That's what I thought it was. So I could be mistaken, and I have to look again, and maybe I shouldn't even go at all. Because if it's a pro-Palestinian event, then I'm not interested.
Even Jamie Raskin, who has been an absolute
Oh,
hero
yes.
in terms of U.S. policies and
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happened, on January 6th, but he did not vote for the
I know.
support of Israel amendment. I mean,
I
he
know.
voted for Ukraine, but not for Israel.
I know. And Kamala Harris herself, before she became vice president, not exactly, and Angela also Brooks. There's a lot to think about there, but at least Kamala Harris is saying the right things now that she's a presidential candidate. And I think that that's what happens, is that once they're in office, they recognize that they can't be so strident in their former opinions when they now are in a position of leadership. And so that's what I'm hoping will happen with Kamala Harris. Okay, I shouldn't have said that. Don't mean to take a political perspective and to favor one candidate over another, but that's what I say to my son, who is in favor of the other candidate. And yeah, anyway, yeah, so that's all I hope for, that in such a position that perhaps Kamala Harris is becoming more aware and being married to who she's married to, and how he spoke at the vigil the other night at Addis Israel, maybe that has some influence too.
Was he reading or was that extemporaneous?
What's that?
Emhoff at the vigil. I couldn't
Oh,
tell.
I would imagine he was reading and some of it then became extemporaneous too. But I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't see. But it looked like he was looking down at words, like he
Okay.
had some paper or something in front of him. Yeah,
Good words.
yeah. I didn't even watch it live. I watched the recording of it and quite powerful. But yeah, anyway.
The article posted and say how many people were there.
Oh, but on the recording, they showed it was full. It was packed in the
In the
balcony.
CNBC seat, right.
Yeah, so that means over 2,000 people were there. So,
All the speakers were great, but
Yeah.
NPR interviewed one of the women whose cousin was killed.
yeah,
They mostly talked about her memories of that time, and she did finally get to bring up the politics of because they were clearly fishing for a specific answer, which she did not give, and I was really
Right,
happy
right.
that she stayed on point.
yeah, yeah.
You mean whether she supported Netanyahu or not? I don't know what you meant.
Well, her perspective was she's not an Israeli, she's an American, and she can't. It's hard for her to make the judgment as to whether the importance of maintaining the Philadelphia line relative to further attacks. And they mostly wanted to. I think they really were fishing for an answer to make peace right now, and she was saying it's a little bit more nuanced than that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole discussion in Israel too about ceasefire to save the hostages or keep on fighting to eradicate Hamas.
I would like a Jews in the news on that.
That's the topic for Monday. That's Monday's topic. Yeah, yeah.
I'll listen. I don't think I want to wear the Shane, let them, the freedom, what, I forgot what the words are, but I hesitate wearing it now.
Why? Bring them home now? I don't know. I mean, Israeli generals are saying that you don't need the Philadelphia corridor completely. And or what? So okay. Anyway, we'll talk
30
about it
seconds.
more on Monday. Let's
seconds.
actually read a few verses from Judges today. I'm not sure we're going to get to the end of the chapter.
Wait, and I have to add something. So, it says bring them home now, but then I read an article and now some people are saying let them go now.
Yes,
Oh.
that
Oh.
is different.
Right.
So
the
look,
nuance.
the English says bring them home now. The Hebrew says our heart is captive in Gaza. So it's fascinating to me that the Hebrew and the English don't say the same thing. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with saying our heart is captive in Gaza.
Right.
The controversy is bring them home now. Right?
The
At what
controversy-
cost?
To me, the controversy is risking my cousin's lives in the army. Hundreds of soldiers versus maybe 30.
Right. Okay, well, we'll talk about that on Monday, the moral
I know.
equivalence and how you can do that. One life, or what is it? It's just under 100 hostages. A
They
third
say
of
they
them
think
are
only
dead.
30 of them are alive, they think. only.
60 are alive.
Okay.
30, I think, isn't that it? Like 30, they know at least 30 of them are dead. That's what I read. And that's at least 60 of them perhaps are alive. We don't know for sure. So they have evidence that, I'm sorry.
It's telling you to start.
Two of my kids were trying to call me.
Kids,
Because
what
it's
kids?
Friday and I give them a blessing on before Shabbat. So yeah, okay. Let's read a couple of verses.
All right.
Let's
Before
read.
you forget what it's about again.
Right. So Yiftach just sent a letter to the king of Ammon. Why are you fighting? Why do you want to fight? We have the right to be here. If you wanted to fight, you should have fought a long time ago. What's your beef now? Okay, so that's where the letter ended. So let's read 29 to 33. Vatahi al Yiftach ruach Adonai v'ya'avor et Hagilad ve'et Menashe v'ya'avor et Mitzpe Gilad u'mimitzpe Gilad avar b'nei Ammon. So the Spirit of God came upon Yiftach, or yes, it was on Yiftach, and he passed over Gilad and Menashe, and passed over Mitzpeh of Gilad, and from Mitzpeh of Gilad he passed over unto the children of Ammon. So like he began his journey to fight. He began his the process of getting ready to and getting to fight the Ammonites. Vayidar Yiftach neder ladonai vayomar im naton titain et bnei Ammon biyadi. So Yiftach vowed a vow, or made an oath, or a vow to God, saying, if God gives the Ammonites into my hand, which is not the end of the sentence, but on to verse 31. V'haya hayotse asher yetze midalte veti likrati beshuvi beshalom mibnei Ammon v'haya la'adonai v'ha'alitihu olah. That, so if God gives the Ammonites into my hand, that is, I defeat them, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to greet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites, that is, doing battle with the Ammonites, whatever comes out to greet me will be for God, and I will offer it as a burnt offering to God. Okay, so this whole story now, I'm not giving it away because it's in the Haftarah, that his daughter comes out to greet him. And we'll see that it's unclear in the story whether he actually follows through on his vow and offers up his daughter as a sacrifice. But that's the thing. His daughter will come out first. 32.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
wait,
go ahead.
but I also have trouble. Okay, but isn't that a little strange that he says that from my house, my door? Like it's not like he has wild animals or goats or sheep in his
In
house,
his
does
house,
he?
right. I know, that's wrong. He should have said that the first animal that I see. If he wanted to offer an animal, he could have easily said, the first animal that I see upon my return in peace, first of my animals that I see when I return in peace, I'll offer it up as a sacrifice. That would be a normal thing to say. This is not normal.
How is it explained?
Well, we'll see. We'll see in the commentary in a little bit, but I want to read two more verses. V'ya'avor Yiftach el bnei Ammon lehilachem bam vayitneim Adonai biyado. And Yiftach went and fought against the Ammonites, did war against the Ammonites, and God gave them into his hand. Vayakem me'aroer va'ad bo acha minit esrim ir va'ad avel kramim maka gedola ma'od vayikanu b'nei Ammon mipnei b'nei Yisrael. And he defeated them, he smote them from Aroer to Minit, 20 cities, up to Avel Kramim, a great smiting, or a great slaughter, a very great slaughter, and the Ammonite people were subdued before Israel. Okay, so now the commentary on this on 256, the Spirit of the Lord, see on chapter 3, he passed over, he journeyed through the areas named to collect troops before returning to his headquarters at Mitzpah. Yiftach vowed as Jacob had done before him, and as Hannah and Absalom were to do after him. Like there are these vows. So like Hannah vowed to God, and that's the Haftarah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. If you bless me with a child, then I'll give him to God, to you. And so that Samuel's born, and then she brings him to the Mishkan, and there he's raised by the priests and becomes a prophet of Israel. Okay. 31, whatsoever, that is the animal whatever comes out of the house, not the vow, but the form it took was culpable. According to the Talmud, Yiftach was one of 3 men who framed a vow carelessly. He did not foresee the possibility that it might be an unclean animal and unfit for sacrifice, which would be the first to meet him, and so he was punished by the tragedy of his daughter. So that's how the Talmud explains it. Why is his daughter the first one to greet him? Well, because of the way he stated the vow. He should have said, the first kosher animal that I see, that will be the offering. But he was careless in how he vowed, but because the Spirit of God was upon him, God is taking it literally. And so then, because he spoke carelessly, God is going to punish him for that by having his daughter come out.
Yeah, but isn't it a given that it has to be a kosher animal? I mean, why does he have to say, why would he have to say that? I don't.
Because the first animal he see could have been a donkey.
Oh, true.
Could
Okay.
have been a camel. Right? Those would be, or a mule. Those would be unkosher animals that people might have on their property. Now, I don't know if they had chickens back then. I don't know if there'd be any wild fowl that's not kosher that he could have, but I don't know. Maybe he had some deer. No, well, deer is okay. I don't know, could have seen a jackal or some other wild animal.
A snake.
Yeah, what I've considered, well, his language was so vague, right? It could have been a rat or a snake. Some modern commentators conclude from the phrase, the doors of my house, right? That he did not exclude the thought of a human sacrifice, but expected it to be a slave. So that would have been better. Sacrifice a slave, not your own child. So in other words, it's just reflecting how difficult and challenging this language is. Kimchi, Ralbag, and Abarvanel, all medieval rabbis and commentators, on the other hand, interpret, on 257 now, it shall be the Lord's if it's something which cannot be offered on the altar, and then it shall be dedicated to God and never be put to secular use. So if it's not worthy of sacrifice because it's an unkosher animal, it's a human being, then it'd be dedicated. But you see, the language is, V'ha'alitihu olah, I will offer it as a burnt offering. It doesn't mean dedicated to sacred service. That's not what those words mean. If, however, it is something that can be a sacrifice, I will offer it up. So in other words, they're adding language there that isn't in the verse itself. They translate, and I will offer it I will offer it as, or I will offer it. So in other words, v'haya ladonai, it will be dedicated to God, v'ha'alitihu, or I will offer it as a burnt offering. That's possible. The vav before words sometimes in the Bible can mean or, besides meaning and. Okay, so yes, so it's not too much of a stretch for those commentators to read it that way. Passed over, etc. Yiftach took the initiative and carried the war into enemy territory. Aroer, not the town on the Arnon, but east of Rabat Ammon. Minit, perhaps a site of Ruim el Mesafar, east of Rabat Ammon, the Ammonite city farthest east on the border of the permanent agricultural settlements. Past this are only villages and nomads, therefore Yiftach turned northward. Avel Kramim, meaning meadow of vineyards, at the northern edge of the Ammonite settlement, perhaps Chorvat Vada at the bend of the Yabok. Okay, so just trying to figure out where that is. Let's see what Alter says about this. Yeah, he doesn't have much, but on 169, back in Alter, and the Spirit of the Lord was upon Yiftach. Only now, when Yiftach actually leads his troops into battle, do we have the formula of the investment by the divine spirit, the leader's charisma that is used for most of the other judges. Whatever comes out of the door of the house to meet me, the Hebrew is ambiguous. It could mean whatever or whoever. Some scholars have argued for the latter because to meet seems to imply a person, But the Hebrew, which is in fact a preposition and not a verb, has the sense of toward. Now, yotzei. The Hebrew was, the Hebrew says, asher yetzei. No, hayotzei, asher yetzei. That comes out, that will come out. The Hebrew, which is in fact a preposition, not a verb, has the sense of toward, and it seems unlikely that Yiftach would have deliberately envisaged human sacrifice from the start. In any case, it is a rash vow. The Midrash Tanchuma shrewdly notes that the first creature out of the house could have been a dog or a pig, animals unfit for sacrifice. The vow focuses on the act of return to the house, but the killing of Yiftach's only child will mean the destruction of his house in the extended sense of the term. The Lord gave them into his hand. This is all we are provided by way of a description of the battle. Okay, so folks, it's 10:25. We did 4 verses today, but that's okay. It's good to catch up and to be caught up in the politics of the day, but we'll meet again next Friday. And just a note that in October, most of the Fridays we will not be meeting because of holidays. Just be prepared for that. So anyway, good to see everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.
Good
Thank you,
Shabbos,
Hannah.
everybody.